Welcome back to MHS Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you come to these videos as a gentle way to unwind before drifting off to sleep. So, before you close your eyes tonight, could I ask you for one small favor? Just leave me a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or maybe share where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Little actions like that help YouTube recognize the content and spread it to more people who might enjoy it. My current goal is to reach around 300 likes within the first 24 hours. Now then, let's step into tonight's chilling stories together. I'm Ethan, 30 years old, a single guy who's a bit awkward, especially when it comes to dating. In today's world of digital dating, I'm even more out of place. After a long string of disappointments on Tinder, where everything felt like a game, I started longing for something serious. Then I met Ava. She was 25, working as a receptionist at a dental clinic downtown. She was the only person I'd managed to stay in contact with for more than a few days. From the very beginning, her messages already showed strange signs, but I kept telling myself they were just typing errors. Her texts were often filled with meaningless gaps or oddly repeated words. For example, a simple answer about her job might show up broken. I work there, blank space, and I like it, like it, like it. I brushed it off, focusing instead on her bright photos and warm smile. I was far too hungry for a real-life connection. After a long period of texting, we finally went on our first date. It went perfectly, just a light dinner followed by a comedy movie. She was charming, smart, and we got along surprisingly well. Ava made me feel interesting too, because every joke I made sent her into bursts of laughter. All my worries about being inexperienced in dating melted away. While we were standing on the dark sidewalk waiting for a ride, even though we had never talked about anything sexual, Ava suddenly made a rushed suggestion, her voice tense. We should stay at a hotel tonight. I agreed instantly, swept up by her sudden boldness and the excitement of how fast things were moving. Inside the hotel room, the quiet started making me uncomfortable. I felt stiff and unsure of what to do next. Trying to ease the tension, I said, "Hey, I'm curious. Why do your messages always have those weird blank spaces?" I asked gently, placing my hand on her shoulder. Ava didn't answer. She just looked at me and gave a distracted smile, but it faded the moment she turned her face away. When we started getting intimate, I tried kissing her softly, but Ava abruptly shoved me away with surprising force. Her eyes changed for a brief moment, like a switch had flipped. I stared in confusion. "What's wrong?" She didn't respond, just glared at me with a disturbed expression. A few seconds later, her tone and attitude shifted again, suddenly frantic. "Keep going. Hurry." Every bit of romance or connection disappeared, replaced by something that felt purely physical, cold and frightening. When I was under the blanket, trying to follow her urgent demand, I heard a series of sounds, like someone pounding the mattress hard. Then came a shh, like air escaping or gas being released, suddenly shifting into loud, rapid panning as if she'd been running for her life. I looked up. Ava was hiding her face, her shoulders rigid. When she finally turned back toward me, I saw blood trickling from her lips. She'd been clenching her teeth so hard she'd bitten herself. Then she began clawing at the blanket with her nails, scratching wildly and ferociously. I froze for several seconds before fear exploded inside me. Panicking, I fumbled for my phone to call the front desk. As soon as I stepped off the bed, Ava suddenly lunged and clamped onto me from behind, wrapping her arms and legs around me in a crazed hold. Her nails tore into my arms and chest, ripping my skin. The pain and the feeling of being overpowered nearly made me pass out. Then, just as suddenly, she let go. Her face went completely blank as she walked straight toward the door like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I realized with horror that if she walked out, I'd be trapped. The hotel required a key card to unlock the door. I bolted out of the room and ran to the front desk to get help. I had barely taken a few steps when I heard a hoarse, guttural scream echo from the hallway behind me. "Good job!" "You did so well." An older staff member rushed out from the office. She looked into the wide-open room, her eyes filled with horror at whatever she saw inside, then whipped her head back toward me. When she noticed my arms and chest covered in blood, her face twisted with fear. She pointed straight at me and screamed, "Murderer!" Within seconds, 3 other staff members grabbed me, one holding a kitchen knife, the other 2 wielding brooms, glaring like they wanted to kill me. I was dragged to the police station. Hours of questioning passed in a blur, my wounds burning non-stop. Finally, a senior officer came in and told me that Ava had been found, naked and drenched, near a canal close to the hotel. She remembered absolutely nothing. At first, the police suspected schizophrenia, but later they confirmed she had dissociative identity disorder, DID, a complex mental illness where multiple alternate personalities, alters, coexist within the same body. The officer looked at me with pity. For the sake of documentation, we named the 3 personalities I had encountered. Chi, the normal personality, the one who had gone on the date with me. The Fiend, the violent, aggressive personality who tried to choke and claw me in the hotel room. And finally, the Trickster, the deceptive one, the personality likely responsible for replying to the phone and shouting when I escaped. They explained the condition likely resulted from childhood trauma, abuse, and an unstable home environment. Sitting in that interrogation room, staring at my wounds, the fear inside me began to dissolve. Confusion replaced terror. I realized the true horror wasn't being attacked by something evil. It was the painful truth that I had dated a girl who was fighting against herself. Ava's inner suffering, the shattering of her psyche, was what had created those monsters. After everything settled down, Ava's mother and younger sister asked to meet me at a cafe to apologize. I immediately noticed how unnaturally thin her sister was, with scars on her wrists, signs she had once self-harmed. I accepted their apology and tried to cut all ties, erasing Ava from my life. But a few weeks later, I received one last email from Ava, or rather, Chi. The content was a scattered, unclear apology about what had happened. I tried deleting it instantly, but curiosity pushed me to scroll to the bottom. There, I found a small line of text, "Help." Right beneath it, in a larger font, another line contradicted it. "Everything's fine, don't worry." I tried piecing together everything I knew, but right then, the doorbell rang, making me jump. I didn't dare open it, fearing Ava or her family might be lurking outside. Thankfully, just a few seconds later, I heard the familiar voice of a friend. Ryan. He bent down to pick up a newspaper that had been shoved through my mail slot. I walked over and took it from him, only to recoil in horror when a pile of human fingernails spilled out. Ryan looked down, then up at me with a pale, speechless face. I called the police immediately. Relief lasted only a moment before it gave way to cold emptiness. I stood frozen by the window as the officer arrived, too shaken to step outside. Not long after, they found Ava sitting alone on a stone bench in a nearby park. She stared into nothingness, her hair soaked, her hands bleeding and trembling nonstop. That Tinder date had brought me the worst horror of my life. I hadn't just dated a woman. I had dated a system, a person screaming for help while other parts of her tried to destroy me. I stared at the fresh scars across my chest and arms. They were undeniable proof. In this world, the scariest thing isn't evil. It's the human soul breaking apart from the inside. I am Ethan, a software engineer. In early December 2024, I had just quit my job after a prolonged period of burnout. I wanted to escape the suffocating city rhythm, so I decided to try solo camping to find a sense of freedom and balance. I booked a spot at a remote campsite called Raven's Nest through a self-service website. According to the online information, it was a small, isolated camp in the Olympic National Forest. It was unmanaged, completely isolated, and only about the size of a football field. That absolute quiet was exactly what I was looking for. I arrived in the late afternoon. There were only 3 other groups camping: a middle-aged man traveling alone who introduced himself as Bronco, notable for his Denver Broncos logo ring, and 2 men riding Harley-Davidson motorcycles who looked over 40. They were rugged but spoke politely, carrying wine like connoisseurs. They seemed friendly enough. We exchanged a few pleasantries, and then everyone returned to their own tents. No one exchanged phone numbers, and I didn't feel it was necessary. As night fell, the camp became absolutely silent, with only the rustling wind and occasional sounds of small animals stirring in the bushes. But around 2 o'clock in the morning, I suddenly woke up to strange noises. They weren't the sounds of wild animals. They were the footsteps of multiple people and whispers very close to my tent. I immediately turned off my flashlight, crawled low to the ground, and peered out through a small gap in the bottom of the tent fabric. I froze when I saw at least 30 people moving around the clearing. They were walking in lines, carrying long wooden planks, arranging them as if they were building something. Everyone wore a slight smile, but their eyes were vacant. No one spoke loudly. Their movements were eerily synchronized, as if they were performing a ritual they knew by heart. A chilling feeling ran down my spine. Every instinct told me I was facing something that was not merely bizarre, but dangerous. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, texting my 2 close friends, Jim and Mitch, who lived nearby. I typed frantically, ignoring grammar. I'm camping at Raven's Nest. Something very weird is happening. I'm surrounded. There are so many people. I don't know where they came from. They are carrying wood. I'm scared. They're smiling, like they're hypnotized. I can't breathe loudly. They're getting close to my tent. Someone is pulling the zipper. Just as I sent the last message, the phone screen suddenly flickered and died. I was bewildered. The battery was full, and there had been no sign of malfunction before. I don't clearly remember what happened after that. When I woke up, I found myself curled up inside a cramped wooden box. The space was only barely enough for me to breathe. The gaps inside were packed with rocks, preventing me from moving my limbs. My entire body was freezing. I could feel a slight vibration underneath, as if the box was floating on water. I tried to listen. Outside, there was the rhythmic sound of lapping waves. There was no light and no human sounds. I was abandoned in the middle of a forest lake, inside a wooden box. I began to scream, pounding on the wooden walls with my knees and elbows. I had completely lost my composure. My head was spinning, and my chest ached with fear and despair. Miraculously, my cries for help were heard. Jim and Mitch, after receiving my texts, immediately set off in Mitch's pickup truck. They tracked my signal to a place called Echo Lake, a nearby campsite with a confusingly similar name. There, they found a group of people gathered around a huge bonfire, calling themselves the Meteor Watchers Society. Bronco's Harley and SUV were parked nearby, but I was nowhere to be found. No one claimed to know who I was. Sensing that something was deeply wrong, Jim suggested they split up to check the Nakiri Gorge area, a long closed canyon that had a trail connecting to Raven's Nest. It was there that they heard the screams coming from the direction of the lake. Mitch jumped into an old wooden canoe near the dock. He paddled out to the middle of the lake where an object was floating. It was the wooden box I was trapped in. He used a utility knife to cut the ropes wrapped around the lid, then forced it open. I nearly tumbled out, soaking wet, crying, vomiting, my breath ragged from panic. We quickly returned to shore, but just as we got into the truck, 2 Harleys burst out of the woods and began tailing us closely. Jim yelled at Mitch to speed up. Mitch drove like a maniac on the bumpy trail, tires spitting out dirt and rocks, while the 2 men relentlessly chased us. It wasn't until we reached the main road and saw the town lights that they finally gave up. The 3 of us drove straight to the nearest police station in Clallam County and reported the entire incident. During the days I spent recovering in the hospital, Jim and Mitch decided to do some digging. They found that Raven's Nest was just a temporary camping post that reopened near Nakiri Gorge, the site of a mass disappearance back in 2011. According to old records, the area was once the operational center of a cult called the Meteor Riders. This group operated cyclically with meteor showers, believing they had to sacrifice 2 lives. One burned in fire to be offered to the Sky Dragon, and one drowned in water to appease the starry heavens. 2 days later, the police checked the Nakiri Gorge area, but there were no traces left. No tents, no cars, no fire pits. Everything had vanished cleanly, as if it had never existed. I recounted the entire ordeal, but they seemed skeptical. One officer said, "We didn't find the wooden box, and there's no concrete evidence." I understood the look in their eyes. They were starting to think I had imagined it, suffering from stress-induced hallucinations and panic. There was nothing to prove I had been kidnapped, except for a few messages I had sent. Everything else was the word of me and my 2 friends. This reality left me feeling more isolated and confused than the night I was locked in the box. 3 days after I returned home, I received a call from the local police. They informed me they had found a charred human finger left in the ashes at the Echo Lake campsite. On the finger was the Bronco's ring that Bronco had been wearing when I met him. Jim sighed when he heard the news. He was certain that Bronco was the fire sacrifice in the cult's ritual. Mitch recalled that he had smelled burnt meat mixed with kerosene that day, but at the time, he just thought someone was grilling. I remembered before going to bed, the 2 bikers had invited Bronco and me to drink wine. I only took a sip, but Bronco finished the glass. Now I understood. The wine had been drugged. Bronco was sedated and burned alive. As for me, because I only drank a little, they took me for the water sacrifice by stuffing me into the wooden box and leaving me to drift on the lake. I thought I had escaped, but a month and a half later, I received a strange Christmas card. The card invited me to a free dinner at a hotel in Seattle. The sender was a company named Meteor 5. I stood in stunned silence. Meteor means star. I no longer had any doubt. The Meteor Riders were still alive, and they knew my home address. I started preparing to retreat from my old life. I sold my belongings, quit my job, and planned to leave the city. I wrote down everything that happened, not for sympathy, but as a warning. If someone invites you stargazing, camping, or to attend a free event, be cautious. Not all cults are just superstition. Some are organized crime. I escaped the wooden box in the lake, but I don't know if I can escape the meteor riders forever.
I'm Jason, and these are my 2 hands without fingers. This is the most painful and terrifying experience I've ever had. 10 years ago, I was a sophomore at the University of California, San Diego. I spent my free time working as a freelance deliverer. The job was risky, but it offered flexible hours and helped me cover my living expenses. Occasionally, I'd receive extra tips, which always made me excited. I'd been doing this job for nearly a year when that fateful night occurred. On that day, I didn't go to work. Instead, I spent time working on a presentation for the end of a course. I forgot to update my account on the order receiving website to not accepting orders. Around 10 p.m., my account received a notification about a delivery order. Before I could read all the details, my phone rang unexpectedly from an unknown number. I answered, and on the other end was a woman who wanted me to deliver the package to the specified address by midnight. She emphasized that it was 12 midnight and instructed me to be punctual. Before I could respond, the call ended abruptly. Right after that, the delivery fee was transferred to my account. Seeing the amount, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was 10 times more than my usual orders. Immediately, I forgot about the importance of my presentation. I rushed from my dorm to the location where the orders were gathered. On the package, there was an address and a phone number, but no recipient name. I started the delivery at 10:30 p.m. It was an old but spacious house tucked away in a narrow alley. Checking my watch, it was 11:57, and I stood at the door, ready and alert, not daring to waste a single second. As the clock struck midnight, I immediately rang the doorbell. But before the bell stopped ringing, the door of the house swung open. From inside, an elderly woman stepped out, looking at me with indifferent eyes. She was tall, but her skin was wrinkled and dark, with high cheekbones and sunken features, and her hair was disheveled, some parts long, some short. I politely greeted her and handed her the package. When I presented the delivery slip and asked her to sign to confirm the receipt of the package, she hesitated. Instead of signing, she stared at my hand for a moment before speaking in a deep, hoarse voice that startled me slightly. "Would you stay for dinner with me?" "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am, but Without letting me finish, she handed me $100, saying it was a tip. She promised to pay more if I agreed to have dinner with her and assured me it would only take 20 minutes. I agreed, feeling a bit crazy, but that's what I did at the time. I thought she might be very lonely and in need of companionship. Plus, it wouldn't take much time, and I could go home and continue preparing for tomorrow's presentation. Stepping into the house, everything was rather old but clean and orderly. She invited me to sit at the dining table, where food and utensils were already prepared for 2. She went into the kitchen to get something. Wanting to break the silence, I asked her name. "Adela," came the short, indifferent reply. I tried asking a few more questions, but she didn't respond, so I fell silent. A moment later, she emerged, placing a pair of scissors and a gun on the table. I was both surprised and puzzled why dinner would require a gun. Adela placed the package on the table and used the scissors to open it. As soon as the last strip of tape was cut and the box was opened, I felt a horrifying regret for agreeing to dinner with her. The package I had delivered turned out to contain human fingers. Adela poured the blood-stained fingers onto her plate and mine. A chill ran down my spine. My skin crawled and my mind reeled in shock. I was too stunned to speak. Adela gripped the gun tightly and began devouring the fingers voraciously. She looked at me and ordered me to eat. Trembling, I lifted the fork and stabbed at a piece of salad near the fingers. I forced a bite of salad into my mouth, suppressing my urge to retch. The metallic stench of blood overwhelmed me, causing my head to spin. I gagged and clamped my mouth shut, sitting in silence as I watched the terrifying woman devour the fingers on the plate. My body was drenched in sweat, shivering uncontrollably, every cell in me trembling. Adela took a tissue to wipe the blood from her mouth just as the table clock unexpectedly chimed loudly. "The 20-minute dinner is over," Adela's terrifying voice echoed. She pulled out $100 and placed it on the table. Adela then initiated another transaction. She said she would pay me $100,000 if I'd let her eat all 10 of my fingers. "These fingers taste too ordinary. Your fingers look tastier," she said. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. This woman was truly insane. I began to feel uneasy, fully aware of everything around me. But I couldn't control my body anymore. I sat there witnessing the whole process of that insane woman eating my fingers, one by one, without resistance, pain, or screams. I woke up in the hospital with both hands bandaged. I still couldn't control my body. The doctor informed me that all 10 fingertips had been severed. Blood tests revealed I was poisoned with a toxin that rendered my body in a paralyzed state beyond control. A passerby found me in a dire condition by the roadside and brought me to the hospital. As for Adela, she was found dead in that house, choked on bone fragments lodged in her throat. She was infected with a virus that affected her brain and nervous system due to cannibalism. I abandoned my studies and lost a bright future ahead of me. If only I hadn't been consumed by greed and curiosity. I wish I could forget the horrifying images of that night forever.
I am Stacy, 31 years old. People around me think my life's pretty great. They think I'm a lucky, happy woman with a talented husband, a sweet daughter, and a pretty comfortable life. It's true I've got all that, but that's just what people on the outside see. What I really miss and want is Julian's care and loyalty. Ever since my daughter Melody was less than a year old, we've been having non-stop fights and disagreements we just couldn't work out. He didn't look at me the way he used to. Those affectionate looks and loving words have slowly turned into cold emptiness. Because of my bad health and a heart transplant I had when I was young, I stay home and rely totally on Julian. I know my husband's cheating on me. The signs couldn't be more obvious. Random phone calls, sketchy appointments, and especially the way his attitude has changed. But I just couldn't say it, couldn't face the truth. I was just scared of ending up with a broken family, so I didn't want to ruin the perfect picture I had built. But putting up with it just meant suffering. When I asked him about the affair, instead of feeling sorry or ashamed, Julian just got insanely angry. It felt like both my body and soul were getting torn apart. It was time to stop living this fake life and face the truth once and for all. I filed for divorce and left with my daughter that night. I went back to where I used to live as a kid, in this quiet little town, almost a 4-hour drive from my place now. When I was young, I was a happy girl, loving the comfortable life my parents worked so hard to give me. But then one day, my parents just vanished, disappeared from this world without a trace. I was adopted by my grandma, and the house has been empty ever since. I looked at Melody sleeping peacefully in the back seat and couldn't stop the tears from falling. My family split up when I was 10, and now that Melody's 10, I couldn't give her the complete family I wanted. We finally got there at 4 a.m. The house stood there in the dark, in the middle of this empty town, far from the rest of the neighborhood, so lonely, like it had been forgotten by time and people. I carried Melody into the house, reached for the light switch, and the bulb flickered for a few seconds before finally lighting up. The furniture was covered in big white sheets that seemed to appear and disappear under the light, making me shiver without meaning to. I turned on a few more lights around the house, and luckily, they were still working. Joe must have been keeping everything in good shape for the past 20 years. I took Melody to my room the night before and quickly passed out after all those hours of driving. The next morning, I was suddenly jolted awake by a noise coming from downstairs. I didn't know where Melody went, so I quickly ran around, yelling her name. At the end of the hallway, I got startled again when I saw a little girl wearing a mini mask. I thought it was Melody, so I called her name loudly, kinda annoyed. But instead of coming to me, she turned and ran off fast. I ran after her, but by the time I got to the end of the hallway, she was gone. I quickly looked around, ran downstairs, and threw open the door. Surprisingly, Melody was out in the garden with Joe. When she saw me, Melody happily called out, "Mom!" and held up the flower she was holding. I let out a big sigh of relief, then got mad and went up to scold her. Melody, teary-eyed, explained that she'd been with Joe the whole time and hadn't touched any mini masks. Anyway, Melody was here, so I'd deal with that later. I turned to say hi to Joe. 20 years ago, he was our housekeeper, and he still is. He was replanting the flower beds when he heard I was moving back here. "Stacy, are you sure you want to move back here? Just you and Melody?" I looked at Joe for a second and then confidently told him my decision. Joe didn't show much emotion, just said he'd send some workers to fix up the house. I think he was worried about just the two of us in such a big house. Joe's always been so caring. Looking at him, I felt bad for how gentle and lonely he seemed. I thought about Michelle, his daughter. Michelle and I used to be best friends. We grew up together in this villa, and those days were so happy. But then Michelle just disappeared, leaving Joe with nothing but longing and pain. I gave him a hug and said a heartfelt thank you. Looking back, I realized just how cruel time can be. The white walls had faded and were covered with this ugly black moss. The roof tiles were all uneven and broken. Some of the windows were shattered. The wooden frames were moldy, and some had big cracks, letting cold winds blow into the house like ghostly breaths. The house was surrounded by a wild garden, with trees growing everywhere. The flower beds that used to be well taken care of were now full of weeds, and the wooden fences were all rotten and rusty from the weather. The paved paths in the yard, which used to be solid and clean, were now covered in green moss. The air around the house felt heavy, with a musty smell mixed with damp soil and rotting leaves, making everything feel even gloomier. It would take a while to sort everything out, but it'd be okay. I went inside, checked the stove to make sure it was working, and then happily told Melody we should head to the supermarket to grab some cooking supplies and make the kitchen feel cozier. I would make delicious dishes for Melody, just like my mom used to make for me. A little cleaning will make cooking way easier. The mom and daughter started cleaning up. I had Melody wipe down the kitchen counter, always showing her what to do and asking her to help with small tasks she could handle. The kitchen utensils were all still here, and the pots and pans my mom used were still around, but the knife set was almost completely gone. The drawer had small brown paint stains, like it had been cleaned but not very carefully. I couldn't remember when those stains showed up. "Mom!" Melody called out to me. I turned around and saw her standing in front of the oven, looking all confused. I started walking over, about to look down, when Joe called out loudly. He brought in the cleaning and repair crew and needed my daughter and me to get out of the way so they could work. I agreed and took Melody away, but she seemed unsure, looked at me with teary eyes, and suddenly started crying. I comforted her and waited until she calmed down, then asked her why she was acting like that, but Melody just stayed quiet and kept shaking her head. At first, I just figured it was an old house, maybe just making weird noises over time, but the weird stuff just kept happening more and more, and I couldn't keep my cool anymore. Melody was the first to pick up on something feeling off. One morning, Melody suddenly burst into my room, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Mom, I saw somebody, some stranger." I looked where she was pointing, but all I saw was a dark corner of the room, nothing out of the ordinary. I figured maybe Melody was just imagining things. The house was way too big for us, with too many dark corners where the light didn't reach. I would need to put up more lights. One night, while I was getting ready for bed, there was loud, urgent knocking on the door, and my daughter was yelling for me. When I opened the door, Melody was curled up in the corner, staring into the dark. "Mom, there's someone," she said, barely getting it out. "They're right there." I tried to calm her down, but I could tell from Melody's panicked eyes that she wasn't making it up. Every night Melody would cry and scream in fear, saying someone was standing outside the door, her eyes stuck on the darkness behind it. Melody's mental state started to slip and got worse. She was scared of the dark, kept talking about going to school, and didn't want to go home. I took my daughter to the hospital, but she was totally fine when she saw the doctor. She even acted friendly and wasn't scared at all. It seemed like as long as she left home, Melody would go back to being the sweet, lively girl she was before. I started feeling weird too, like there was something that couldn't be touched, but was still there in the space. I started dreaming about my parents. I hardly ever dreamed about them before, but now those dreams come back every night, haunting me. My parents were standing there, their eyes full of worry and pain, like they wanted to say something. Other times, they were 1,000 times scarier. My parents seemed really close, but they weren't the same familiar faces they used to be. Their skin was pale and torn, with deep cuts all over, like they'd been ripped apart, showing layers of rotting flesh. One of my mom's arms was gone, just an ulcer where it used to be, and my dad was missing a leg with just a stained thigh left. Every time I woke up, I'd get this heavy, breathless feeling in my chest. It felt like they had something to tell me, but I just couldn't get it. Why was I dreaming about them? And why did every dream freak me out so much? This feeling, it didn't make any sense, but it kept haunting me. I didn't dare tell anyone, scared they'd think I was crazy. But most nights, my parents kept showing up in those weird dreams. I was exhausted and told Joe about the creepy dreams I kept having about my parents. I feel like they're trying to tell me something, or maybe warn me about something. When Joe heard me say that, his eyes suddenly went cold, and he stared at me, eyebrows knitted like he was pissed. But the next second, his face totally changed, and I was left confused. Joe thought I was overthinking and told me I just needed to rest. He stopped me from touching the furniture in the house, saying it was too old, useless, and would just bring up bad memories. He'd often throw stuff away without even asking me. He always told me to stay relaxed and focus on taking care of and raising Melody. One time when I saw my mom's oven being packed up and taken away, I couldn't help but cry. I knew Joe was behind it, but what he said made sense for me at the time. I walked over, planning to touch it just one last time. "What are you gonna do?" Joe's serious voice freaked me out and almost made me scream. Joe showed up right behind me, his eyes cold and full of caution. Without saying anything else, he told someone to grab the oven and a few other things, then left while I was left standing there, totally confused. Before this was even over, something else came up, and I just kept sinking deeper into panic. I could barely recognize my daughter. I just put Melody to bed, but when I went down to the kitchen, I saw her sitting on the living room sofa again. I called Melody's name and went over, but she wasn't there. There was no one. I thought I was just dizzy and freaking out. Another time I had just gotten back from taking Melody to school, but then I saw her running from the hallway into the bedroom. I was suspicious and on edge about everything around me. I almost hurt Melody when I mistook her for a shadow and tried to chase her off. The shadow kept showing up in my house more and more. In the dark corners, the living room, at the end of the hallway, sometimes right in front of me when I opened the door, the little girl would just stand there, staring without saying anything, her eyes blank. I couldn't see her face clearly because she was wearing a Minnie Mouse mask. One time, when I went down to the kitchen to get some water in the middle of the night, the little girl was just sitting on a wooden chair in the dining room. When I got closer, she didn't move, but her eyes just stared at me with both pain and anger. "Michelle," I blurted out, when I suddenly felt that familiar vibe from my old friend. Out of her left chest, a dark red stream suddenly started flowing. and I freaked out, stepping back, looking for something to grab onto, then knelt down. The red streak from her chest quickly spread, soaking her shirt and little body. I woke up, screamed, looked around, and felt like I was falling into an endless pit with no light to help me find a way out. The dreams about my parents and all the weird stuff happening in the house had me on edge, like I was stuck in a never-ending nightmare. The broken marriage just drained me more, like I was carrying this huge weight I didn't know how to talk about with anyone. I felt like I was losing myself little by little, so I decided to see a therapist for help. Maybe the messed up marriage made you more sensitive and put a lot of pressure on you. But who knows? Maybe the house you and your daughter are living in now has some other secret. I got home, took the meds the doctor gave me, and my sleep got better. I felt way better. The anxiety and restlessness that had been bugging me for the past few days finally eased up. I took a deep breath, looked around the house, and just soaked in the peaceful vibe. It was time for me to get my act together and take care of my daughter, the house, and everything that's coming next. But what the doctor said still kept me thinking. I knew there was something in this house, like a secret just waiting for me to figure out. One morning I gave Joe a big smile and asked how the house renovation was coming along. Joe smiled, his kind eyes showing that everything was slowly getting done. But when I walked into the living room, I looked around and was shocked to see the whole place had been totally redone. All the old stuff, the things that had been part of the house for so many years, was gone. I felt a mix of shock and disappointment. The family photo of the three of us was gone too, so I asked Joe right away. "Stacy, I just want to help you let go of the past. All this stuff is just holding you back. You're stuck in memories that keep you from moving forward." Joe's words made me tear up. Maybe he was right. I needed to let go of everything tied to the past. I was at a loss for words, wanting to argue, but deep down I knew Joe just wanted what was best for me. A few days later, after I'd calmed down and gotten used to the new place, I told Joe about the little girl in the mask I had met. I told him about the little girl in the mini mask who kept showing up and disappearing. I could kind of make sense of the image of my parents, but that little girl's appearance made no sense to me. I felt off, not getting why these dreams kept happening. I feel like I know her, kinda. Like Michelle. When I talked about the little girl in the mouse mask, I could definitely see the change in Joe's eyes. His eyes suddenly tensed up, like he just snapped out of a deep dream. His eyes weren't calm like usual. Instead, they were filled with worry. His lips were pressed tight, teeth clenched, like he was trying to hold back his emotions. I only had a moment to notice the change in his eyes before Joe suddenly stood up. His gaze went wild, his hands started shaking, and he couldn't control his movements. He started pacing around the room, his fingers brushing the table, the wall, then suddenly opened every cabinet and drawer, rummaging through them while calling out Michelle's name over and over. He grabbed my shoulders tight, eyes wide, yelling at me, "Why can you see Michelle? Why have I tried so many ways but never seen her again?" A moment later, Joe suddenly stopped, standing in the middle of the room, face red, breathing heavy, eyes still full of panic. Finally, he apologized and rushed out, even though I kept asking him questions. A few days later, Joe didn't show up again, which left me even more confused about his weird behavior that day. One morning, while cleaning the old kitchen, I found a small door under the sink, covered by moldy paint and dirt. I don't remember the kitchen ever having a door like that, so I got really curious. I opened the door and found an old wooden box with a rusty lock on it. My heart was racing. After grabbing a small hammer to break the lock, the box popped open, and inside were some papers and a few old photos. My hands were shaking as I went through the papers in the box. Some of the medical papers talked about my childhood illness and how I needed an emergency heart transplant to survive. The more I flipped through, the colder my spine got. The last page was Michelle's organ donation certificate. I collapsed on the floor, my whole body shaking. So Michelle wasn't actually missing. The heart beating in my chest is Michelle's, the friend I once loved. I wanted to confront Joe right then. I called him, but he didn't answer. For the next 2 days, I was a wreck, just living in panic and torment. Then one evening, I heard a knock on the door. I opened the door and saw Joe standing there, looking exhausted and drained. We sat down in the living room. I finally gathered the courage to tell him what I found in the wooden box. Joe didn't seem surprised at all. He just lowered his head and clenched his fists. "Yeah, Stacy, I killed your parents." The confession hit me like a punch to the gut. Your parents were so good to me and Michelle, just to get ready for the moment they took her away. They didn't just take my daughter's life, they broke my heart. I couldn't handle the pain, so I got my revenge. To this day, I still have no idea where she's hidden. I looked at Joe, my heart hurting. The hate in his eyes scared me and hurt at the same time. But what I couldn't handle even more was the fact that I'm living with Michelle's heart inside me. I was the reason his whole family was falling apart. "But I can't hurt you, Stacy. Michelle is still alive inside you. It's not your fault." After that talk, Joe left the house, and I was left with thoughts I couldn't shake. I sat by Melody's bed, holding her close and crying. I had no idea how I was going to live with this weight on me. I loved my parents, but they did something I just can't forgive. I loved Michelle and was grateful to her because my life was swapped for hers. And I couldn't hate Joe because his pain was something I understood more than anyone. My hand was shaking as I held the phone, my mind torn between calling the police to end it all or staying quiet, hiding this awful secret to protect whatever fragile piece was left for Melody. One afternoon, I was walking around trying to find a way down to the basement because I couldn't find one of our suitcases. The light from my phone's flashlight lit up a corner of the basement. I spotted a small door in the corner of the room. I couldn't resist my curiosity, so I opened the door and walked in. I was surprised to see the room still had all the furniture Joe said he'd thrown away. A wave of nostalgia hit me as I looked at them, and I walked over, touching each one. When I saw the old oven, I suddenly remembered Melody's weird look when she moved in, like she had seen something awful inside. With shaky hands, I decided to open the oven. As soon as I opened the lid, a wave of horror hit me. Inside was a human corpse, just dry bones left, hidden under a rotting shirt. Panic kicked in, so I bolted up the stairs, my heart racing like crazy, tripping all over the place. The first thing that popped into my head was to find Melody right away. Fear hit me in waves as I tore through the rooms, yelling her name, but she was nowhere to be found. The place was dead quiet and empty, making me feel totally trapped. All of a sudden, I heard Melody crying out loud. I dashed to the front yard, where I heard my daughter crying and calling for me. I grabbed Melody and held her tight, finally able to breathe. After a few seconds, I checked her over, and luckily, she was okay. Melody was still crying her eyes out, pointing at the flower bed Joe had planted a few days ago. I felt completely numb all over. Tears started streaming down my face, but I couldn't get a word out. Buried under the soil was a child's skeleton. The little arm had completely rotted away, leaving just dry, white bones. The skull that was showing had a face that was totally falling apart. I hugged Melody tight without thinking, and she cried out in discomfort, which woke me up. I called Joe, and we both found our family. Finally, the truth came out, and the pain had somewhere to settle. The last morning before I left, I found a handwritten letter from Joe on the kitchen table. His handwriting was shaky, emotional, and so intense that I couldn't look away. In the letter, Joe said that for the past 10 years, he stayed in the house for 2 reasons: to find out where Michelle was buried, and to meet me, someone he saw as part of his daughter. He wrote that watching me grow up with Michelle's heart was the only thing that kept him going, giving him a little hope to live. But now, all the pain's been dealt with, Michelle's at peace, and he doesn't have anything left to miss. He hopes I'll live happily and enjoy life for Michelle, because that's what his daughter would have wanted the most. In his last lines, he said that even though he wasn't the best dad, he loved Michelle and knew I was part of his family too. The letter ended with a sincere blessing and a really tough goodbye. As I finished reading the letter, tears filled my eyes, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed by all the sacrifice and love Joe had shown me and Michelle. In that moment, I realized he'd found peace, and I knew I had to live a life that wouldn't let him or Michelle down. I am Evelyn, 32 years old. A light drizzle was falling on the quiet streets of Portland, streaking water down the car windows. I pulled up my coat collar and hurried toward the office building. April was colder than usual this year, and the gloomy sky made it feel like something was off. The office was buzzing with laughter this morning. Everyone was pulling pranks on each other. Someone had stuck a note on my computer screen. Password changed. Good luck. I didn't even react. April Fools had never really been my thing. A big yellow envelope showed up on my desk, no name on it, but it definitely caught my attention. I opened it. Inside was a plain white sheet of paper with just one sentence. The game has just begun. I glanced around the office, confused. No one even looked my way, like they were all waiting for me to do something. I brushed it off, figuring it was just someone's dumb prank. That night, when I got home, there was a small black gift box sitting right by my door with a crimson ribbon. I picked it up, and a shiver ran down my spine. When I opened it, there was another piece of paper inside. Happy April Fools. I shivered again, and as soon as I folded the paper, I noticed a small photo at the bottom of the box. It was a picture of me from that morning, right after I stepped out of the coffee shop near my office. It was taken from a distance, but it was pretty clear someone had been following me. I carried this weird mix of confusion and discomfort, thinking the whole thing was just some creepy April Fool's joke. That night, a soft scratching sound outside my bedroom window jolted me awake. I sat up, heart racing, telling myself I was just imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The next day, I left the office earlier than usual, just wanting to get home and take a break. As soon as I walked into the house and shut the door, there was a knock. I hesitated for a few seconds before opening it, and there was a big box sitting on the ground. Right away, this strong, nasty smell hit me, making me want to puke before I even opened the box. My heart was pounding. I kinda knew what I was imagining, but my curiosity wouldn't let me stop. My hands were shaking as I peeled off the tape, and the second the lid popped open, I instinctively stepped back. Inside was a pile of red, slimy flesh wrapped in some cloth. Pale white patches of skin were mixed with this gross, sticky liquid. Flies buzzed around the edges, and tiny maggots crawled all over the surface. My stomach turned, and I bolted to the bathroom to throw up everything. It took me forever to calm down, but I went back to the box. I had to get rid of that disgusting thing immediately. But then I stopped. There was a small piece of paper on the box, covered in dried blood. Remember me? I didn't remember. My mind was a total mess, completely confused. But someone out there remembered me, clear as day. The cops showed up 10 minutes later. They checked the box, took meat samples for investigation, and searched around the house. 2 days later, the cops found out the meat in the box was bought from a local slaughterhouse. Looking at the cloth that wrapped the meat, it looked a lot like a jacket I used to have. My head was spinning, and I felt like I was losing it from this creepy prank. He had been so close to me. He snuck into my house, and there was a good chance he was still out there somewhere without me even knowing. "Have you had any recent disagreements?" a cop asked me. My mind was all over the place as I tried to dig through my memories. A few faces popped up. A former coworker who had acted out and was pretty hostile toward me before getting fired. Some weird guy I always saw at the coffee shop near my office. Every time I went, he'd be sitting in the corner like he was watching me. Who could be behind this messed up prank? The cops started investigating based on the list of suspects I gave them. They checked the security cameras near the coffee shop and saw that the weird guy had been there a bunch of times when I was there, but there was no proof he ever approached me. When they looked into him, he turned out to be just a regular delivery guy with no criminal record and no connection to what happened. Next up was my ex-coworker who got fired, Mark. After digging into his past, the cops found out he had a record for harassing women. During the interrogation, Mark didn't deny hating me after getting fired, but swore he never planned any revenge. The cops checked Mark's recent calls and activity, but found nothing linking him to what was happening to me. That made them start thinking maybe someone else was behind all this. Someone with deeper, more dangerous motives. A week later, I was living with constant anxiety. One afternoon, I got a package in the mail, a USB. I plugged it into my laptop, and there it was, a video of me sleeping, with the camera slowly getting closer and closer. The steady breathing of whoever was holding the camera started blending with the sound of my own breathing while I slept. With every passing second, my body froze up more and more. At the end of the video, the camera turned toward the window, showing the reflection of a tall, familiar figure dressed in black. I held my breath, my hands shaking as I slammed my laptop shut. But before I could even process what was happening, my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. "Hey honey, fun little joke, huh?" His voice was deep, filled with amusement. My hand clenched around the phone. I thought of him, but there was no way. He was still supposed to be in jail. "Dominic, how is this even possible? The law only traps the weak. I'm back, and I've got all the time in the world to play with you." Hearing that cold, twisted laugh made every scar on my body sting. All those memories of my personal hell came rushing back. My baby with him ripped away from me by violence just before his due date. I took a deep breath, forcing down the panic rising in my chest. I had to keep him talking long enough. I swallowed hard, my eyes flicking to the corner of my laptop screen, the location tracking system the cops installed 2 days ago. The GPS was updating every second. He was so close. My hand shook as I tapped the table, a signal to the tracking team. Dominic's creepy voice echoed in my ear. "The back window. I've been in there so many times. You have no idea." My heart nearly stopped. I didn't dare turn around. I could feel his eyes on me from somewhere in the darkness. I took a deep breath. The SWAT team was in position. "Dominic, this is the last time." "Happy April, fools," I whispered. A loud bang came from the other end of the line, followed by shouting, the sound of a door being kicked down, and Dominic's panicked screams when he realized he was trapped. I hung up. The location screen flashed one last time before the signal went dead. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This time, he wasn't coming back. So, my name's Roger, I'm 25, and a week ago, I almost died. That day, after work, I swung by Costco to grab some new kitchen stuff, knives included. While waiting in line to pay, I glanced around the store and caught sight of some guy standing outside, just staring at me. Messy brown hair, a little shorter than me, dressed like a total slob in this big, heavy coat that went all the way down to his legs. Why the hell was he wearing that in the middle of May? I couldn't place where I'd seen him before, but something about him felt weirdly familiar, and not in a good way. By the time I finished paying and looked back, he was gone. I walked out toward the parking lot, and there he was, standing right next to my car. He was pretending to be on the phone, cigarette in hand, but it wasn't even lit. His eyes, though, still locked on me. I picked up my pace, jumped in my car, and got the hell out of there. I figured that was the end of it. That night, Diana, my girlfriend, was at my apartment. I was all hyped up, making dinner, stealing glances out the window while waiting for her. Then, out of nowhere, I spotted a guy standing in front of my building. He was off in the distance, barely visible under the dim streetlights. I knew right away it was him, the guy from earlier. That weird coat gave him away. But the worst part was that he was staring right at me. He knew where I lived. And just like that, the uneasiness I felt before cranked up to a whole new level. Was he following me? I decided to head downstairs and get some answers. But just like before, he was gone. Right then, Diana showed up. I ran out to meet her, and we headed upstairs together. We had dinner and watched Netflix together. I didn't bring up what happened earlier. I didn't want to freak her out. Around midnight, there was a knock at the door. We weren't expecting anyone this late. I got up slowly, walked to the door, and peeked through the peephole. It was him, the guy from the store. But this time, he was standing even closer, his eyes filled with this unsettling kind of patience. He wasn't banging on the door, wasn't yelling, just knocking, slow, steady, like he already knew I was right there. One of his hands was tucked behind his back, like he was hiding something. I didn't open the door, just asked, "What do you need?" That's when he pulled out a knife, slowly. The blade caught the hallway light, gleaming like a warning. "You dropped this at the store." My whole body locked up. Diana heard him too. She was about to say something, but I quickly put a finger to my lips. Sorry, I don't think so," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He just stood there for a second, staring. Then, he cracked a weird, unsettling smile. "Oh, wrong door. My bad." And just like that, he turned and walked toward the apartment across the street, the one where that young woman lived alone. This time, he kept the knife hidden behind his back. My stomach dropped. Something bad was about to go down. Before I could react, the girl opened her door. He lunged. "Diana, call the cops now!" I shouted as I threw the door open and sprinted toward them. He got in a couple of stabs, but I wasn't about to let him do it again. I grabbed his wrist, the one holding the knife, and yanked it with everything I had. The knife went flying, and I slammed him to the ground. Right then, the cops showed up. The ambulance took the girl away, rushing her to the ER, but the worst part was still coming. "Let go and put your hands up." My stomach dropped. My whole world just collapsed. Guns aimed straight at me. My heart was racing, breath coming fast and shaky. He was still on the ground, but instead of freaking out, he was smiling. That smug, twisted kind of smile. "No, he's the attacker," I yelled. But the cops kept their distance, moving in cautiously. He was still lying on the floor. Then, out of nowhere, he smiled. I called the cops. I tried to help her. He was the attacker. His voice was steady, serious, and he was pointing at me. He called the cops himself? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this his plan all along? He wanted to make me look like the attacker. But before I could even process it, Diana burst out screaming that the bastard was the one who stabbed the girl. The cops detained both of us while they checked the hallway cameras. A few minutes later, they let me go. I pulled Diana into a tight hug, trying to calm her down. When her breathing finally steadied, she looked up at me, voice shaky as she whispered a name. Luke. Luke, our old classmate from high school. Her ex. He looked so different now, I hadn't even recognized him. Back in high school, Diana and Luke had dated, but their relationship was a mess, full of fights and control. Eventually, Diana had enough and broke it off. But Luke, he refused to let go. He tried everything to hold on. A few weeks later, Luke was already dating someone new. Diana felt lucky to be done with him, but Luke never actually let go. In court, he didn't look scared, didn't look sorry, not even a little. As they escorted him out, he turned to me, smirked, and whispered, "Good luck. There are more of us than you think." Those words stuck with me, kept me up at night. After the case was closed, Diana was scrolling through social media and randomly came across an old class photo. Luke was in it, standing right next to his two best friends. So there were three of them, and their most recent posts, all tagged near where Diana and I lived. A chill ran down my spine. Had I really gotten rid of him? My name's Miguel, and I've been working at a Taco Bell in Cleveland, Ohio for almost 2 years now. That awful day, I was on the afternoon shift. The clock on the wall said 5:37 p.m., and customers were just coming and going like usual. All I wanted was for the shift to end so I could head home and catch the baseball game. Then I heard a car horn blaring from the drive-thru. Snapped me right out of it. I looked up and saw a white car stopped at the ordering window. Right behind it, barely a yard away, was a black pickup. Something felt off. The white car wasn't moving forward like they normally do, and from where I stood, I could see the woman inside checking her rearview mirror over and over, looking freaked out. I stepped away from the counter, walked over to the window and slid it open. "You okay? Please call the cops. That guy in the truck's been tailing me since the freeway. He hit my bumper twice. I think he's drunk, or just insane." I glanced over at the pickup. The windshield caught the sunlight just right so I couldn't see who was inside at first. Then the driver's door flew open. Out stepped this tall guy, maybe early 50s, silver hair all wild, beard thick and scruffy. He looked wobbly, like he could barely stand straight. Drunk, for sure. I whipped out my phone. My heart started racing. I dialed 911, not taking my eyes off him for a second. Then he stopped, just a few meters from the woman's car, the Honda, and pulled a handgun from his waistband. I swear, my blood turned to ice. "Stop! I'm calling the cops! They're on their way!" I shouted. The dispatcher was saying something, but I couldn't make out a word. The guy turned toward me, eyes locked on mine. Bloodshot, empty, eyes that'd stick with me forever. No hesitation. He lifted the gun and fired. The first shot tore across my right cheek, white hot and blinding. I hit the floor hard, phone slipping right out of my hand. I touched my face and felt warm blood pouring down. It didn't feel deep, probably just a graze, but the pain hit me like a truck. And the fear, man, that fear had teeth. I started trying to crawl away from the window, but then bang! Another shot. Agony exploded in my left arm. I looked down and saw blood pumping out of a hole in my Taco Bell shirt. I clamped my right hand over the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, but the blood just kept pushing through my fingers, bright and fast. I bit down on my lip, just to keep from screaming. Every muscle in my body locked up in pain. Lying there on the floor, I could still see through the drive-thru window, and what I saw felt straight out of a damn horror movie. He was walking toward the Honda, gun aimed right at the driver's window. The woman inside was scrambling to climb over to the passenger seat, trying to shove the door open. But it was too late. 3 more gunshots. The window blew out in a spray of glass, tiny shards raining down onto the pavement. The woman's scream cut through the air, loud, piercing, and then silence. My head was spinning, from the blood loss, from the panic. I looked out the window again. He was just standing there, middle of the Taco Bell parking lot, gun still in his hand, face calm, too calm. Sirens were wailing somewhere in the distance, but they were too late. He glanced around for a second, like he was admiring the damn sunset or something. Then, slow as hell, he raised the gun to his own head. I shut my eyes. Bang! When I opened them, He was on the ground, face up, not moving, blood spreading under his skull like ink on paper. I was still on the floor, gasping, heart racing, ears ringing from the shots. My whole body was shaking like I couldn't stop. I heard footsteps, people shouting, the sirens getting louder. Then someone dropped down next to me, a co-worker. She pressed a towel to my arm, kept saying something over and over, but I couldn't make out a word. All I could see was his eyes. Those empty, hollow eyes, the flash of the gun, her scream. Afterward, the cops told me their names. Nicole Williams, 25, James Harmon, 53. He had a history of mental illness. 2 total strangers. One messed up road rage incident turned into something out of a nightmare. I still haven't gone back to work. Not sure if I ever will, at least not to that Taco Bell. I'm taking it one day at a time, trying to work through the mental scars. But I know this much. I'm damn lucky to still be here, grateful, and I don't take a single day for granted anymore.
I think my uncle has murdered his daughter. My cousin, Skylar, passed away when she was just 10 years old. On the day of the funeral, my aunt wailed in grief and despair. Skylar was an only child, the one my aunt considered her entire source of life, who had left so suddenly and painfully. Skylar fell nearly 20 stairs. When discovered, she was lying in a pool of her own blood, with her head broken at a 90-degree angle. The sweet, innocent little girl with that warm, radiant smile was taken by God too soon. But how can one judge the work of the Almighty? Those were the words my uncle, Skylar's father, spoke at his daughter's funeral. He was shockingly calm, or perhaps that was the limit of suffering a strong man had to endure. The casket was open so that those who knew and loved Skylar in life could come and see her one last time. I supported my aunt as we took slow, heavy steps toward her daughter's side. I had taken care of Skylar since she was very little. Mourning her loss felt immense, but my heart ached even more for my aunt, who had to endure such overwhelming pain. Standing there looking at my cousin's lovely face, suddenly, her eyes shot wide open for a moment. I flinched, stumbled back, and fell to the ground. Looking around, the faces of anguish and the sounds of weeping made my head spin. A strong grip from a sturdy hand helped me to my feet. It was my uncle. He looked at me, still with that calm gaze, and said, "This will be our secret." I don't understand what he's saying, what is going on. I started to feel suspicious, paying more attention to him, and having thoughts that gave me chills multiple times. "Sheila," my aunt called me, extending her weak arm. She needed me because she could no longer stand on her own. I quickly grabbed my aunt's hand, trying to finish the funeral. 2 days after Skylar's funeral, my aunt asked me to come to the house to help her clean up Skylar's belongings, and of course, I agreed. My aunt was still tired and resting in her room, so I didn't disturb her. Stepping into Skylar's room, I stood still, silently observing everything around for a few minutes before starting to clean up. I was quite curious why everything was so messy, when Skylar had always been pretty tidy. When I got to Skylar's desk, I sat down to look at her drawings. The first was a drawing of a close-knit family of 3, and it was easy to guess that Skylar was drawing her own family. But the expressions of the parents in the drawing were not very cheerful. Next was another family drawing, but the father and mother were arguing very intensely, while the daughter sat curled up in a corner, crying in fear. The final drawing depicted a girl who had fallen down the stairs, her neck twisted to one side. The mother knelt beside her daughter crying, while the father stood on the highest step of the staircase, looking down with an expressionless gaze. "This will be our secret, okay?" The voice of the uncle startled me, causing me to jump up. I pressed myself against the wall to keep my distance from the cruel person in front of me. "Why did you do that?" I looked at my uncle with an angry gaze, but my body was trembling uncontrollably. He didn't answer, lowering his head and clenching his fists tightly. I immediately ran away, before becoming the next victim. Driving home, I cried a lot, feeling angry, scared, and desperate. Stopping the car in front of the house, I suddenly remembered that my aunt was still in the house of the evil one. I immediately called the police while turning the car back to my aunt's house. My aunt's terrified screams echoed as I hadn't even got out of the car yet. Grabbing the pepper spray, I rushed into the house. The scene in front of me left me and the police officers who arrived shortly after in shock. My aunt was kneeling on the floor, right next to the staircase, her body soaked in red liquid, holding tightly onto a red knife instead of the original gray one. My aunt was screaming wildly along with terrifying curses. Next to my aunt was my uncle, lying motionless, his neck bent at a 90-degree angle, with countless stab wounds on his body. He's no different from his terrible and brutal father. Every time I see it, I will be reminded of him and go insane. Now it's over. The two of them will be together forever. My aunt burst into laughter at the trial, then hugged her daughter's ashes and fainted. A family that seemed perfect was shattered by a violent, unfaithful, and selfish husband, leading to an unerasable hatred in the wife's heart. Every year, I visit my aunt in prison and visit the graves of my uncle and Skylar on important occasions. Even now, I still can't enter into a marriage, despite being 36 years old. The playground slide took my son. I'm Isaac, 40 years old, and I have a small family with my wife and our 5-year-old son, David. We were married for almost 10 years before we had David. David hasn't been as lucky as other kids. His brain development is slower than what's typical for his age. We still love and cherish him, and we want to give him the best we can. But ever since we had David, we have had a lot of tense arguments about how to raise him. My wife always wants everything to be systematic and scientific, while I prefer our child to develop more naturally. A lot of times, our discussions have turned into arguments, even right in front of David. One time, my wife and I got into such a heated argument that we ended up breaking some stuff around the house because I just couldn't calm down. David was standing near the dining table, trembling and crying because he was so scared. My wife covered her ears, screaming and crying. I figured the best way to handle it was to grab David and just leave the house. I drove him to the playground at the park, which was a few miles away. Sitting in the car, the boy kept crying and looked at me with a scared expression. I don't even remember how I drove to the park. Everything was so blurry. When we got to the playground, I tried to cheer him up by laughing and joking around to help David feel more at ease. After a bit, David started laughing too, and we played on the slide together. David ran through the colorful plastic tubes and slid down, and I chased after him, pretending to be the boogeyman to make the game more exciting. David was freaking out because the boogeyman was chasing him, so he quickly sat down, ready to slide down. I stood at the bottom of the slide to catch my son, but David never came down. I called out for David and started searching every corner. My mind was racing, and I didn't even know how much time had passed, but I was so exhausted that I just collapsed next to the slide. I woke up in the hospital with a doctor, a nurse, and some police officers there. Once I remembered everything, I quickly reported it to the police to get help. My son got taken near the slide. Please help me find him. Mr. Isaac, we need you to come to the police station to help us. with the investigation into your son's disappearance. You're the main suspect in this case. I was stunned and tried to explain, saying I needed to see my wife because she must be really worried since neither of us came home all night. We need to keep you two apart for safety reasons. Once we sort this out, if you're not the one responsible, we'll let you go home. What the hell are you talking about? I need to stress again that my son is missing, and I really need to see my wife. A policeman came over to restrain and handcuff me, while the other one talked to the doctor. After the doctor gave a nod, 2 policemen walked me out. I was still feeling dizzy, so I got off the bed and just collapsed right away. The 2 police officers were even rougher with me. When I got to the police station, they gave me some kind of drink and told me to wait for 15 minutes before the interrogation started. My head was spinning, and my memories kept coming and going in a really confusing way. After 15 minutes, I was feeling more awake, and the police came in with a stack of photos. As I looked at each photo, my emotions just intensified. The first photo showed my car parked in the park, and the front of it was pretty badly dented and scratched. Next were some photos of the slide at the playground. Finally, there was a photo of me, covered in dirt and blood. What is this? Are you sober now, Isaac? I stared at the police in shock, then looked back at the photos. I grabbed the bottle of water I had just drunk, realizing it was a hangover cure. I held my head, trying to piece everything together. It turned out I had always been a terrible husband and an irresponsible father. I used alcohol to deal with stress and to justify my failed and miserable career. I constantly pressured my wife to have kids. When my wife gave birth to David, I didn't care about him at all. I was always half sober and half drunk, which scared and pushed him away. That night, I just couldn't control my wild behavior. Because of the weird prank and me looking like a real boogeyman, David panicked, slipped, and fell from the slide to the ground, and I hid David in the bushes, about a mile away from the playground. On the day I faced my wife in court, I couldn't bring myself to look at her, even for a second. We settled both the divorce and David's case at the same time. I lost everything and paid for my selfishness and carelessness with a 20-year prison sentence.
When I was 9, I made up a game to play with my 2 best friends. The rule was simple. Instead of saying hello with our names, we would say the name of the best thing we had eaten that day. For example, if I had a really good pancake for breakfast that my mom made, when I saw my friends, I would say, "Pancake has arrived." Mia might choose mac and cheese, and Luke would pick a hot dog. We would laugh so hard every time we met, arguing over who picked the best food. The suburb we lived in was very quiet. Everyone was friendly, but there was one man that nobody wanted to get close to. We didn't know his name. He lived alone in the house at the end of the street. His clothes were always stained, and his long hair was matted and greasy, along with a thick beard that covered half his face. He usually took walks by himself in the afternoon and never spoke to anyone. But the creepiest thing wasn't his dirty appearance. It was his smile, a constant, fixed, rigid smile. His eyes were wide open and stared without blinking. It gave anyone who saw it the chills. Our parents always warned us to stay away from him. No one knew what he did for a living, and no one wanted to know. The fateful afternoon happened in mid-October. We were playing tag on the lawn in front of my house. Suddenly, I felt like someone was watching me. I stopped and turned my head. The man was standing right in front of me, only a few feet away. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the three of us. The familiar smile was still plastered on his face. My two friends also stopped. All three of us froze, too afraid to move. The air suddenly felt heavy.
Human meat has arrived.
His voice was hoarse, and it was the first time I'd ever heard him speak. We were stunned, like we had turned to stone. My two friends gasped, their eyes wide with surprise. And then he laughed. A laugh with no emotion in it whatsoever. I felt a shiver run down my spine. We turned and darted into the house. I locked the door right away. Mia was crying in fear, while Luke and I ran to the window to watch. The man was still standing there, looking towards the house. His smile hadn't changed. After a while, he finally left. Mia and Luke called their parents to come pick them up. We didn't plan it, but none of us told our parents what had happened that afternoon. In the days that followed, we still played the naming game, but we weren't as excited as before. His words kept haunting my mind. A few days later, the news was on every local TV channel. A middle school student in the city is missing. It was Lauren, a girl who went to the same school as us. Lauren's family posted missing flyers everywhere, and lots of police and volunteers were out searching for her. The incident shocked the whole neighborhood, especially since the victim was a kid. My parents were really worried. My mom set a curfew, not allowing me to leave the house after 5 p.m., especially not to go anywhere without an adult. Luke and Mia were the same. We were so bored because we couldn't play together often anymore. The usually peaceful neighborhood gradually became gloomy with a heavy atmosphere. Then one morning, people started buzzing. The man at the end of the street had disappeared. Besides those who were curious, many parents felt a sense of relief. My mom was a perfect example, but things weren't that simple. That same day, the police swarmed and cordoned off the man's house at the end of the street. They carried a lot of things out of the house. A large crowd gathered outside, whispering and talking. Then came another shocking piece of news. The police found Lauren's belongings in the man's house. There was a backpack with Lauren's name printed on it, a pair of sneakers, and a jacket. He immediately became the prime suspect. Police issued a statewide warrant for his arrest, but he had completely vanished. No one ever saw him again. We were too young then to really understand, but we all knew what happened was not simply a bad person doing bad things. It took a very long time for me to figure out the horrible meaning hidden behind the sentence. Human meat has arrived. It was a confession in disguise. Maybe he had watched us playing that game many times, and when he appeared that day, he wanted to play along, wanted to announce his favorite food according to the rules of the game we had created. Or even scarier, he was choosing his next meal to be one of the three of us. Lauren might very well have been the food he was talking about. After that, the game ended. No one said anything. No one mentioned it again, as if silence would make everything disappear. But it didn't. It remained deeply ingrained in our minds. From then on, I started being cautious about everything. It took me a long time to trust someone just because they smiled kindly, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I dared to say the name of my favorite food without getting a chill.